Covent Garden is a popular district in London on the eastern fringes of the West End. It is one of London's biggest tourist magnets, attracting over 44 million visitors annually. But it hasn't always been like that, and for this video I've been researching the somewhat dark and grisly side of Covent Garden. The side that tourist books might not mention, but a side from which ghostly whispers still remain, if you know where to look. So join me on this wander as we unpick some of these stories, walking in the footsteps of what some might call a more unsavoury side of Covent Garden.
And welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Claire and this is The Wanderless Way. Today we're on a spooky adventure around Covent Garden, and I'm going to show you a side of Covent Garden that you might not have seen before. We're talking murder, we're talking ghosts, and we're talking spooky tales. So if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, stay tuned and let's go on a little wander around the dark side of Covent Garden.
Records tell us this area was originally fields, but by the 1200s was in use by the Abbot of Westminster Abbey for their community. Practically it was farmed to grow fruit and vegetables, and at the time was known as the Garden of the Abbey and Convent, or later Convent Garden. After Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries, it changed hands, and by 1654 was developed as a small open-air fruit and vegetable market, where it became more popularly known as Covent Garden. By the 17th and 18th century, it started to earn a bit of a reputation, and although it was known for its entertainment, this consisted of theatres, taverns, and an abundance of brothels. Until the police force took its roots, the district was known to be violent, with gangs ruling the streets and pimps and prostitutes spending their lives here. Duels of passion were a common sight. I think you get the picture. And so we'll begin our journey into the past, right back in the 16th century, with a murderous character known in legend as the Muffin Man. One of the dark stories of Covent Garden is here on Drury Lane, where the tale of the Muffin Man comes from. So it's that old saying, do you know the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man? Do you know the Muffin Man who lived on Drury Lane? Well, this is Drury Lane, and the Muffin Man was a 16th century serial killer. The Muffin Man's real name was Frederick Thomas Linwood, who was a baker by trade, and the story goes that he lured small children down dark alleys using an English muffin on a piece of string. So we teach our kids not to take sweets from strangers. In the 16th century they told their children not to take muffins from strangers, and so they invented the poem, Do You Know the Muffin Man? Next stop, I am here at St Paul's Church, which is often referred to as the Actors' Church. It's been very, very important in Covent Garden over the last 300 years. And has a lot of memorials to famous actors in there. But the reason I'm here for the dark tourism is because it holds the remains or grave of the very first plague victim here in London in 1665. So I'll tell you a little bit more information about that while we have a little look at the gardens. The Great Plague of 1665 was thought to be mostly bubonic, and it killed off about 15% of London's population. Plague sufferers experienced headaches, vomiting and fever, alongside swellings in the lymph nodes found in the armpits, groin and neck. They had a 30% chance of dying within 2 weeks. Those who could left the city, including King Charles II and his courtiers, who fled to Hampton Court and later Oxford. The poor, however, had little choice but to remain. As a result, the death rates continued to rise at rapid speed, and London had no choice but to dig a number of pits around the city to dispose of the dead. But before all that, reports tell us that the first recorded casualty of that epidemic, Margaret Porteous, was buried here at St Paul's on the 12th of April 1665. Not much is known about Margaret, except that she was poor and would have been identified as a bubonic plague victim by the searchers of the dead. who were people, mostly women, hired by the parish to examine corpses and determine the cause of death. As you walk over the pretty gardens and paving at St Paul's, it's hard to imagine the bodies that are beneath our footsteps. In 1853, the churchyard was closed to burials, after which the tombstones were removed and laid flat, and the garden landscaped into this peaceful picnic zone we see today. Plague victims aside, today St Paul's Church is affectionately known as the Actors' Church. Inside there are walls of memorial plaques for those that have passed, and there are a few famous people buried here too. For more on that, please watch my last video titled Theatreland. Now, it's no surprise that a building with so much history and importance has a few ghostly tales, and I did find a couple of suggestions that the church is now haunted by some of those famous faces from the entertainment industry. Have you seen anything ghostly at St Paul's Church? Let me know in the comments. Next stop on our dark trail is the Theatre Royal in Covent Garden, which is one of the oldest theatres in the world. I think it's the oldest theatre in London, and there have been loads and loads of dark stories for this place, including a few murders. So bear with, I will share them all with you. Drury Lane Theatre, more commonly known as Theatre Royal, was constructed in the 17th century. It's had a cursed history where fire's been concerned, and the building has been destroyed and rebuilt a few times over. It has been dubbed the most haunted theatre in Britain, if not the world, with the Man in Grey said to be the most commonly spotted ghost. The Man in Grey usually appears during matinees in a long grey coat and hat. Many have cited him at the end of the fourth row of the upper circle, in which he goes to the rear gangway, disappearing into a wall. Spookily enough, during the 1840s, some renovations were made which uncovered a secret room. Inside, skeletal remains of a person in grey rags were discovered. The remains, it is said, indicated a knife had been pushed through his or her heart. This secret room was in the exact location where the ghostly apparition had been sighted to disappear. The theatre has a long-standing connection to royalty, and it was here that King Charles II met his mistress, Nell Gwyn, an actress who rose from selling oranges in the Covent Garden market to becoming a pioneering performer. As mistress to the king, Nell went on to bear him several children, eventually dying at around 37 years old, less than 3 years after the king's death. Does her spirit still linger on the stage? Some believe it does. Other royal visits to the theatre, though, have been less than pleasant. In 1716, the future George II narrowly escaped an assassination attempt. And later, in 1800s, it is reported that James Hadfield attempted to kill King George III. During the national anthem, he fired a pistol at the king who was standing in the royal box. The bullet missed, and Hadfield was declared insane and committed to Bedlam Hospital for the rest of his life. Ironically, King George III was also declared mad. As mentioned, the Theatre Royal on Drury Lane is the world's oldest theatre in continuous use, so there's going to be lots more tales, but we need to move on, so I'll finish off with one more ghastly tale of a murder over a hairpiece. Charles Macklin was an Irish actor who performed extensively at the Theatre Royal. In 1735, he was quarrelling with a fellow actor by the name of Thomas Hallam. The pair, it is said, were arguing over a wig when Macklin thrust his cane in temper, accidentally piercing Hallam's eye. The event happened in the scene room in front of many witnesses. Sadly, the cane had gone into Hallam's brain and he died 1 day later. Although tried for murder, Macklin escaped with manslaughter. He died aged around 107 years old, and there is a memorial tablet inside St Paul's Church which shows a dagger piercing the eye of a theatrical mask. I'm not sure how I feel about that. What's your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. So next on our list, I'm going to take you to the Royal Opera House, and a site of a murder, and then I'm going to take you to the Bow Street Magistrates, which is very important in the criminal history around here. With entrances on Bow Street and Covent Garden Piazza, the Royal Opera House sits proudly and is home to two famous companies, the Royal Opera and the Royal Ballet. But if you were around in 1779, you'd also know it to be the murder site of talented performer Martha Ray. Martha Ray was a British singer with a colourful backstory. Said to be good-looking, intelligent and gifted, she quickly rose to fame, attracting the attention of John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich. For those that enjoy history, John was the man acclaimed to have invented the sandwich in 1762. But it's not just this tasty meal that he's famous for. Alongside his gambling interests, the Earl is said to have been a number of other bad habits, including being a member of the notorious Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club was a select collection of distinguished gentlemen rumoured to be involved with black magic, satanic rituals and various other devilish activities. Being part of the Hellfire Club was a way to engage in immoral acts considered unacceptable by society. It wasn't long before John Montagu took a shine to the beautiful Martha Ray, and despite him being married, she lived with him as his mistress from the age of 17. At some point, the Earl introduces Martha to a soldier by the name of James Hackman. It is thought Hackman became infatuated by her, and that the pair had a short affair around 1778. Reports say that Martha broke off the relationship, much to Hackman's disappointment, and on the 7th of April 1779, whilst outside the Opera House, she was murdered by him. Martha, who was attending a performance with a female friend, is said to have been approached and shot in the head whilst getting into her carriage. Hackman attempted to then shoot himself, but failed, and instead was hung in front of a large crowd at Tyburn on the 19th of April, just 12 days later. The Earl of Sandwich never recovered from his grief, and the events surrounding Ray's murder were depicted in the popular novel Love and Madness by Herbert Croft. Just across from this site, you can find the Grade 2 listed building once known as the Bow Street Magistrates Court. It is here that a number of high-profile defendants have been, including Oscar Wilde, the Cray twins, and the infamous Dr. Crippen, an American homeopath hanged in 1910 for the murder of his wife. This gruesome murder has gone down as one of the most notorious crimes in British history. Hawley Harvey Crippen and his wife Bella, also known as Cora, were living at 39 Hilldrop Crescent in Holloway, where the pair, it is suggested, was struggling with their marriage. One evening after a dinner party with friends, Belle is said to have berated him for not escorting a guest to the toilet. It was the last time she was seen alive. Crippen made up a whole heap of stories, including one that she'd gone to America, fallen ill and eventually died. His new mistress moved into Hilldrop Crescent and started to wear Belle's jewellery. This roused the suspicion of friends, who reported it to the police. Soon after, Crippen, with his new mistress, fled the country. The couple's disappearance led the police to search the house again, where they eventually found the torso of a human body buried under the brick floor of the basement. The mutilated remains, which were missing the head, limbs and bones, were identified as Cora Crippen, based on a scar she was said to have. Meanwhile, the fugitives, who were disguised as father and son, were reported by the captain of the ship for appearing suspicious. The pair were escorted back to England to face trial at the Old Bailey, but before this they came to Bow Street. Newspaper reports tell us that a great crowd assembled outside the famous police court in Bow Street, London, where Dr. Crippen and Miss Lee Navive were to be brought before the magistrate later in the day, in connection with the mystery surrounding the discovery of human remains in the cellar of 39 Hilldrop Crescent, Camden Road. Despite maintaining his innocence, Crippen was hanged. But strangely, recent forensics findings suggest the body couldn't possibly be Cora's, which just makes the whole story even weirder. Next on the trail, we are going to a pub that Charles Dickens supposedly drank in. It was one of his local pubs, and it's also one of the oldest pubs in Covent Garden, And years ago it used to be nicknamed the Bucket of Blood because they used to do bare knuckle fights here. I've been told it's haunted as well, so it's just got to be done, hasn't it? The Lamb and Flag. This pub is where Charles Dickens supposedly frequented. It was meant to be his local. And it's one of the oldest pubs in Covent Garden. Established in 1772, past managers of the Lamb and Flag have said that strange noises can be heard after dark in the cellar. Now, despite a lot of searching and many saying that it is the most haunted pub in this area, I was unable to find any specific ghost stories, but the dark history alone makes it a worthy site to visit on this trail. So next stop on the tour, and we are at the Adelphi Theatre at the back where the stage door is, because this is where William Terrace, who was a very famous actor at the time, did a lot of performances here at the Adelphi. He was murdered on the stage, on the step down here at the stage door by a rival actor. I think there was a little bit of jealousy going on, and yeah, so this is the site. There's a plaque up above me, a plaque up to mark the spot where, and apparently it was a massive thing in Victorian London, and people at the time were absolutely shocked and horrified by it. The Adelphi Theatre, which is situated on the Strand, was the scene of a now famous crime when on the 16th of December 1897, during the run of Secret Service, the prominent British actor William Terrace was murdered. Terrace was a well-known figure in the theatre scene, and on that fateful night in December was approaching the stage door in Maiden Lane to begin his performance of the evening. Reports tell us that Terrace was confronted by a struggling actor named Richard Archer Prince, who had a history of mental illness. By 1897, the deranged man, who had been previously helped by William in his acting career, had become unstable and unemployable. A few days before the murder, Prince had been ejected from the foyer of another theatre and was seen arguing with Terrace in his dressing room at the Adelphi. On the actual day of the murder, Prince was turned away by the funds office after asking for money. It is said he then crossed the street and waited for Terrace concealed in a doorway near the Adelphi's stage door. In a fit of rage, Richard Archer Prince stabbed William Terrace 3 times, once in the back, once in the side, and then finally in his heart. The murder shocked the public and theatre community, and Prince was declared insane, committed to Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum. This murder is remembered as one of the most sensational crimes in Victorian London, highlighting the pressures within the theatrical profession and mental health issues at that time. We are now outside an unassuming bookshop, Cecil Court, number 23, and it was here on Friday the 3rd of March 1961. Elsie Mae Batten was tragically murdered. So she was the shop assistant, part-time shop assistant, working here behind me in the store, murdered by one of the antique knives that was on sale. Now the reason that this crime is very, very important in history is because it was the first identikit ever created by the police. So police took descriptions from the witnesses about the suspicious man that had been in the shop the day before, and they used this information to create a portrait of who they thought was the killer, and they eventually found him. A policeman found him. So it was the first identikit that was the police had ever used. So, and they're still using, obviously they're still using it today, but with far more advanced technologies. Bless Elsie Mae Batten, she was murdered here, but she won't be forgotten because this crime went on to produce the identikit. Suspenseful horror fans, did you know that Alfred Hitchcock's father used to be a greengrocer here on Covent Garden Market, and he even is thought to have inspired one of Hitchcock's movies called Frenzy, which is about a serial killer that goes around murdering people on Covent Garden Market. Have you watched that film? I haven't actually seen it, I'll be totally honest with you, but I'm going to add it to my must-watch list, especially now I know this cool fun fact about it. So yeah, Alfred Hitchcock's dad was a greengrocer here on Covent Garden Market. So that's the end of these dark tales. Thank you to everybody for watching. Please give me a like to help support the channel, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future.